Some of the ugliest images of the American invasion of Iraq 20 years ago came in 2004 in photos taken at the Abu Ghraib prison. And a warning to our listeners, this story contains graphic descriptions of the torture of prisoners in U.S. incarceration. The photos were shocking, and what happened haunts former detainees. American troops stripped Iraqi prisoners naked. They leashed them and forced them into contorted or sexual positions. NPR's Ruth Sherlock has this report from Baghdad.
It's been almost 2 decades since Talib al-Majli came out of Abu Ghraib prison, but it could have been yesterday. Desperately thin still, with dark circles round his eyes, Majli bites at the skin of his wrist, a nervous tic he developed in the prison. The time I spent in Abu Ghraib, it ended my life. I'm only half a human now, Majli says.
Is it okay to take a picture?
He shows me his prison card and other documents. He was detained on the 31st of October 2003 and became prisoner 152516 in Abu Ghraib. Through an interpreter, he tells me about some of the abuse.
They torturing us. They making us naked. Sometimes they threw that sound grenades on our cells, and sometimes they used the shotguns, and they killed 2 of prisoners. And they used these dogs to terrifying us. They flooded our cells with water.
One photo that shocked people around the world when it was published in 2004 shows naked detainees with bags over their heads, piled on top of each other in a grotesque human pyramid. One American soldier grins, another gives a thumbs up. Majli says he believes he is one of the men in that photo.
Does he remember what he was thinking and what he felt when he was in that pile?
I wished for death, Majli tells me. I would rather have been dead than to be in that position. There was other demeaning treatment too, like being poked with a stick in his genitals. One day Majli tried to appeal to a soldier to say he was innocent and that he should be let go. They put him in solitary confinement for a week. Majli says he was detained when he was simply visiting an uncle. He swears he never took part in the insurgency against the US. He was eventually released after 1 year and 4 months with no charges against him. US military intelligence officers later told the International Committee for the Red Cross that as many as 90% of Iraqis detained were actually arrested by mistake. Majli says when the US invasion began, he wanted to thank George Bush from the bottom of his heart for removing Saddam Hussein from power. But he says this good deed became my curse. Now in his 50s, Majli lives with his 2 adult sons in a home made of 2 rooms with an outside toilet in a slum in Baghdad. On the day we visited, water from the rain pooled on the mud street outside. Majli has moved many times since his release from Abu Ghraib, sometimes in search of work, but also because of the stigma, he says, he felt from his neighbours when they learned of the degrading treatment he suffered.
But it's not his fault. It was something that was done to him. Majli acknowledges this, but says other people didn't see it this way. His boys quit their school because they were so badly bullied, and he says his wife left him because she was embarrassed. Since his release, he says he's suffered from depression. He self-harms. Bite marks up and down his arms. He works odd jobs, hanging signs for companies, sometimes earning around $30 per week. If he had to summarise what the experience in this imprisonment did to his life, what would he say?
I lost my family, it destroyed my health situation, destroyed my living situation, destroyed everything for me. And I always feel I was humiliated.
Majli tried for years to find ways to get compensation from the US. But he had no money to hire a lawyer, and when he went to the Iraqi Bar Association, they told him they didn't deal with these kinds of cases. The Iraqi Ministry for Human Rights confirmed he'd been a prisoner in Abu Ghraib, but that was all. A US military official now, who didn't want to be named because he wasn't approved to speak, speculated that Majli should have been able to apply to the US military for condolence payments, sometimes made in conflict. It was difficult for Iraqis to apply for compensation in those years. Baher Azmi, a lawyer with the Center for Constitutional Rights in New York, says the US hasn't been making payments to victims of torture and that this violates international law. Instead, it's been
denying compensation for victims of torture in Abu Ghraib and in CIA black sites, denying compensation to those who the United States quite literally kidnapped and spirited away under the extraordinary rendition program to third countries.
11 soldiers were convicted of crimes in Abu Ghraib, and Azmi did manage to secure some compensation for some other Abu Ghraib victims, but only from a private security firm whose translators operated in the prison, and not from the US military. Azmi didn't know about Majli, but says the case sounds consistent with others, but he probably can't get compensation now.
It's heartbreaking, but I think it's too late.
Majli says not a day goes by without him thinking about what happened to him. It's as if his life is frozen in time by his need for justice or some kind of recognition. He says this is why he's talking to me. I want to make this a matter of public opinion, to ask for my rights. Even, he says, just for an apology. Ruth Sherlock, NPR News, Baghdad.